I want to live this life unsafe, unsure, but not afraid.
Bill Martinez.
Hey, we're back with you, America. 28 minutes before the top of the hour. I'm Bill Martinez. Our conversation with Bill Salus, the Now Prophecies, continue. This is so important for us to have this conversation and understand what's going on. You know, as kids, we were taught the Lord's Prayer, and a key verse is there. It says, "Thy kingdom come, thy will be done." We need to understand that this is God's kingdom, and it's up to us to be in alignment with what God is doing. And, I often look at the difference between, our alignment with God versus when we're not aligned with God. You look at the grief to happiness ratio, Bill. And when we're in alignment with God, it goes well. Even in the midst of all the wackiness and suffering we may go through, at least we realize what team we're on. But when we're against God, that's when we're kicking at the goads and frustration and confusion mounts. I mean, if ever America was confused, it is now, because we have, like that one verse in the Bible says, a nation without vision will perish, and that without, will perish. That aspect, that interpretation also suggests that we cast off restraint. And when you look at America today, there's no restraint. As one preacher says, that America has forgotten to blush. We don't blush anymore about the things that happen in our country. I mean, we are, we're a mess right now. And I think, Bill, people instinctively believe that, and instinctively, because God says He places that within us, we know we're off track, and we know we deserve judgment. And some people are walking around with their heads lowered, just thinking, okay, when is it going to fall on us,
Oh, absolutely. And, I have 3 chapters in the Now Prophecies book that are devoted toward America. And I put forward, one of the chapters is called The Decline of America as a Now Prophecy. And I give the biblical, geopolitical, prophetic, and other aspects as to why we should be concerned in America right now. We need to be prepared for the fact that this country is falling from its superpower status. I opened that chapter. I formatted this book so it's an easy understand read for everybody. This isn't just all for the scholarly. This is for every man, woman, and child in this country. I opened chapter 6 talking about the decline of America with a story. I'm having dinner with an in-law, Pastor Dave Barton, and he is taking care of a friend's son who's 12 years old. And the son says to me, because I'm going to a movie after dinner with Pastor Dave, and he says, "Bill, where do you like to sit when you go to a theater?" Innocent question. And I said, well, I like to sit, his name was Brent, I like to sit in the back of the theater so the screen isn't too big in front of me, And he looked at me real seriously and says, "My dad and I always sit in the back." And all the innocence of his question was taken out right there. And I said, "Whoa, okay, why is that, Brent?" And he goes, "Well, because we don't want to get shot from behind." Oh, wow. Now, this is not, and I go on to say in the book, and I said this to Pastor Dave, I said, this is nothing we would have heard when we were 12 years old in our generation, exactly. When Donna Reed and Father Knows Best, we didn't even lock our doors. Right. But this is the heart of America right now. This is a dangerous situation. The Lord has been warning this country through remedial judgments dating way back to when our hedge of protection came down with the towers in 2001. We had Hurricane Katrina, the most costliest disaster in our nation's history. We had the mortgage meltdown in 2007, the economic implosion in 2008. BP, largest oil spill 2010. We had the worst tornado season 2011. Prophetic voices have been lifted up. Joel Rosenberg, Jonathan Cahn, you name it. There's been a plethora of them. Mark Hitchcock warning this country. And, then ultimately the way the Lord deals with the nation at the end is He gives them the leaders they deserve. And the leader we have right now is, he's pro-homosexual. His attorney general, now it's been adjudicated by the Supreme Court, cannot approve DOMA, the Defense of Marriage Act. One man should be married to one woman. Has paved the way toward same-sex marriages. Has endorsed and signed on with a nuclear deal with Iran that puts Israel in harm's way. That's very dangerous for Israel. We have crossed all these boundaries, which we talked about in the first segment, nations and empires across them before have been destroyed for. And the examples we talked about just real quickly. Sexual perversion in 2000 BC, Sodom and Gomorrah was destroyed because of that at the time of Abraham. Idol worship, which characterized the northern kingdom of Israel, ultimately led to child sacrifice. That's how bad it was. And they were destroyed by the Assyrian Empire in 722 BC. Then there's wickedness and moral decadence, which was characterized by the Assyrian Empire, and they were destroyed by the Babylonians and Medes in 612 BC. And then ultimately, one of the ones very concerning that we should be concerned about in this country, at the time of Pharaoh with Moses in Egypt, through about 3500 BC, when Pharaoh was trying to kill the Hebrews, and the Red Sea episode, and they tried to destroy the Hebrews at the Red Sea. Ultimately, what happened? The Red Sea destroyed Pharaoh and his armies. Anti-Semitism. And so we've got to be real careful in this country. We are walking on a very fine line. And I think America slips from superpower status, and we find ourselves in Ezekiel chapter 38, verse 13, in a compromised situation where we're no longer a superpower in a prophecy I was talking about in the first segment that is the marquee event, the Ezekiel 38 prophecy. And we're in that prophecy, I believe. And I have a whole chapter devoted to how we can know that.
Well, people have taken America's standing for granted for so long, Bill, that they may say, so what? So what if America's not a superpower anymore? We don't want to be the police of the world. We just don't want to have the standing in the world that we've had previously. So what difference would it make? Well, if you look at the historical examples when a judgment came upon a country for the various reasons we're talking about, just a real quick rundown of, just so we have our rap sheet in front of us for Americans to really look at and step outside of the forest to see the trees, step outside of the trees to see the forest. 1962, Engel versus Vitale, we took prayer out of schools. 1963, Abington School District versus Shemp, we took Bible reading out of schools. 1973, Roe versus Wade, we legalized abortion. Now we've got about 1 million abortions a year going on since that time. 1980, Stone versus Graham, we removed the 10 Commandments out of the public places. 2003, Lawrence versus Texas, we struck down sodomy laws in Texas, which affected 13 other states at the time. 2013, the United States versus Windsor struck down the Defense of Marriage Act. One man should be married to one woman, which is exactly what Jesus quoted in the New Testament, God's model for marriage. 2015, Obergefell versus Hodges, Supreme Court case ruled in favor of same-sex marriages, which crosses all kinds of dangerous biblical boundaries. Well, when those nations and empires crossed numbers of those boundaries, and we've crossed them all, they were destroyed. Now, when you look at the destruction of the southern kingdom of Judah in 586 BC, when they went into 7 years of Babylonian captivity, those that resisted their now prophecy that they were going to go into 7 years of captivity ultimately got to a point of starvation and was so depraved they were actually eating their own children. They became cannibalistic. So I'm not saying that that's in store for America, but you know what? We can't ignore historical precedent and biblical precedent for what happens when God judges a place. You know, I mean, I don't want to harp on this too long, but, you know, I went out recently and saw that movie Exodus, Gods and Kings, or I think that's what it was called. And I don't necessarily recommend it as a, you know, witnessing tool to someone you're trying to let know about God and Jesus and all that. But what I did notice with the cinematography and the graphics we have right now is when those plagues hit Egypt, this was about the time of Moses and Pharaoh, the setting of the movie. When those plagues hit Egypt, those 10 plagues, man, that took out that whole country in a matter of just a few days, so to speak, or a month or so. If God wanted to destroy a country, there would be no problem with the resources He's got that we're not even aware of to take out a country. And we need to be careful. I mean, what if you have a solar flare or something that has an EMP, electromagnetic pulse effect, or something like that? You know, most of the younger generation is running around with about 5 cents in their pocket because they're all on ATMs and debit. What if all your electronics goes out periodically? Look at the panic and the hysteria and the such. So what I try to do with this book is just get people to kind of wake up to where we're at as a country, what's going to happen in the world from a biblical and prophetic perspective. Well, I'll tell you, Bill, when you look at the timeline of where we are, the fact that we have crossed these forbidden biblical boundaries, I know some would say, did God say? And that was the same thing that Satan asked back in the Garden of Eden. Did God really say? Yeah, God said it, and He meant it. He even said to Cain, He said, look, if you do well, will it not go right for you? And that's where we are, I mean, in this country. And we know instinctively we have not done right. It is not going well for us. and we know that we're in trouble, but we keep wanting to put our head in the sand. We're talking about the Now Prophecies with Bill Salus. We've got more from Bill right after this. Stay with us, America. 18 before the top of the hour.